Welcome, traveler. You have wandered far today, through the busyness of thought, through the crowded halls of noise and motion. But now, the gates of the old world creak open for you, a world where time moves slowly, like candle wax dripping gently onto an old oak desk. A world where silence is not empty, but full of stories not meant to be thrilling, but soothing. This is not a tale of knights or battles. No dragons roar here. No banners fly in the wind. There is no sword to raise, no kingdom to save. Just the dust of forgotten pages, the soft scent of hay and ink, and the steady rhythm of quiet, medieval life. Perhaps you are sitting now or lying down. Perhaps the lights are dim, and the world outside your room has gone quiet. Let the weight of your limbs sink into the earth. Let your mind drift, like a feather floating on the breath of time. You are entering a place where nothing truly happens, and that is the comfort of it. Here, people rise with the sun, not in haste, but in habit. They drink tepid broth from wooden bowls, and whisper greetings to neighbors they've known for 40 years. The sky stretches endlessly above a thatch-roof village. The smoke from the baker's oven curls like a lullaby into the pale blue. There are no loud noises here, only the soft toll of a crooked bell tower, the hush of parchment being turned by tired hands, and the slow, deliberate tick of a life that never needed to hurry. We begin tonight in the year 1200 and something. The exact date doesn't matter. Time in this place is like butter left out in the sun, soft and slow and just beginning to melt. And so, dear listener, with your breath easy and your thoughts like ripples on a quiet pond, we will begin our journey with a man named Oswin. Oswin the turnip farmer. A man whose greatest adventure was choosing between two nearly identical turnips. And for him, that was quite enough. Oswin wakes before the sun, not because of ambition or duty or urgency, but because the rooster next door is slightly confused. It has always crowed 37 minutes early. Every single day, Oswin does not mind. He stirs slowly beneath a wool blanket that smells faintly of hay and old bread. He yawns, once, then again, then waits. He sits upright only when he is certain he won't fall back asleep sitting up. This takes about 7 minutes. Eventually, he rises. His feet find his wooden shoes, which have not moved since last week. He puts on his usual tunic, brown, slightly itchy, and almost perfectly average. Oswin is, by all definitions, a turnip farmer, not a beet farmer, not a cabbage grower, not even a general vegetable man. Just turnips. Only turnips. And he likes it that way. Oswin walks to his field. The path is short and uneventful. Along the way, he passes the fence he built 5 years ago. It leans slightly to the left. He nods at it, respectfully. The field is quiet. A gentle mist hugs the rows of pale green leaves. The soil smells of last night's dew. Oswin kneels beside the same row he checked yesterday. He squints at one of the turnips. It looks exactly the same as it did yesterday. That's good. Growth that is too fast is suspicious. Oswin once had a turnip grow 3 inches in a week. He didn't trust it. He never spoke of it again. He touches the topsoil gently with the back of his hand, not because it tells him anything, but because it is part of the routine. He adjusts a leaf, then adjusts it back. A nearby bird watches him and does not blink. Around midday, Oswin takes a break. He leans against his favorite tree, a tree that has, for decades, produced absolutely nothing useful. No fruit, no flowers, just shade. And that, Oswin thinks, is enough. He unwraps a piece of stale bread and chews slowly. Very slowly. There is no rush. The sun passes gently overhead. The clouds take their time. Somewhere in the village, a child laughs once, then stops. Oswin finishes his bread. He brushes crumbs onto the ground. The crumbs are claimed by ants, who seem much more determined than he is. In the late afternoon, Oswin checks on a particularly stubborn turnip. He has named it Gregory. Gregory has not grown in over a week. Oswin speaks softly to it, not because he believes it will help, but because silence can sometimes be too loud. You'll get there, Gregory, he says. One day at a time. Gregory does not respond, and Oswin does not expect him to. As the sun begins to sink behind the low hill near the field's edge, Oswin gathers his tools, two of which he never used today. He simply enjoys carrying them. He walks slowly home. The same path, the same leaning fence, the same faint creak of the cottage door. Inside, the fire has gone out. But that is fine. Oswin does not mind the cold. He eats a bowl of broth, slightly salty, slightly bland, entirely satisfying. He lights a single candle, then decides it's too bright and blows it out. Darkness wraps around him like an old friend. He lays down, pulls the wool blanket over himself, and just before sleep claims him. He thinks about Gregory and wonders if tomorrow will be the day the turnip finally grows. But it probably won't, and that's perfectly fine. In the village of Eldenford, just beyond the turnip fields, there lived a man named Aldrich. Aldrich was a builder, but not a fast one. In fact, no one quite remembered when he started building the wall. It was simply always there. A pile of stones, a few tools, and Aldrich. Always frowning, but in a quiet, thoughtful way. Not upset, just perpetually uncertain, as if the wall might be building him instead of the other way around. Each morning, Aldrich arrived with the same tools. A chisel, a trowel, a small piece of bread he never seemed to finish. He stared at the stones, then stared at the spot where a stone should probably go, then back at the stone. His brow furrowed gently, not deeply, just a hint of a crease, like a man mildly troubled by a vague memory. He said softly. Aldrich said, nearly 37 times a day. Sometimes he meant yes, sometimes no. Often, he simply didn't know what he meant. And that, too, was enough. The wall itself was about waist-high. On a good day, some parts dipped, others leaned. It was not a wall that would ever win prizes, but it was, undeniably, a wall. And that was something. On one particular afternoon, Oswin the turnip farmer passed by. He stopped, looked at the wall, looked at Aldrich. Aldrich looked at the wall, then at Oswin. Neither of them spoke for a full minute. Then Aldrich said, "I think this stone wants to be on the left." Oswin nodded. "They often do." And then he walked on. That was the longest conversation either of them had had that week. It left Aldrich visibly contemplative for the rest of the day. He moved the stone. It made no real difference, but it felt correct. As evening fell, Aldrich sat beside the unfinished wall. His eyes softened. There was a slight curve to his mouth. Not quite a smile, but something near it. He thought to himself, "Maybe tomorrow I'll place 2 stones." And for Aldrich, that was nearly a revolution. The candlelight in his cottage flickered against the wooden beams. The tools were set down with care. The unfinished bread remained unfinished, and Aldrich fell asleep, dreaming of straight walls that didn't need to be perfect, just peaceful. In the northern wing of the old abbey, where the wind whispered beneath heavy stones, and nothing ever truly hurried, there lived Brother Anselm. He was a monk of few words, even fewer needs. His world was small. Just a desk, a window, and a vast collection of very old books, about very little. And Anselm, it must be said, was fascinated by dust, not in the sweeping sense. He did not dislike it. Quite the opposite. To Brother Anselm, dust was ancient, patient, and oddly well-behaved. Every morning, as the sunlight tilted through the monastery's windows, he would sit quietly, watching the particles drift. One might swirl. Another might pause mid-air. And Anselm would squint ever so slightly, his lips gently pressed, a quiet intensity behind his otherwise serene face. "Ah," he would whisper. That one might be a Thursday dust. He had begun keeping records, carefully drawn diagrams of the dust paths, annotations in the margins. Large mode floated south-southeast, possibly from the broom closet, settled briefly on psalms. Respectful, unusually lazy dust remained airborne for 10 full seconds. These notes filled 3 full volumes, all bound in plain brown leather. None had ever been borrowed. Sometimes, other monks would pass by. They would glance at Brother Anselm, head tilted slightly, brows raised in mild bewilderment. But no one questioned him, because Anselm looked so content. And in the monastery, that was the highest achievement one could hope for. One day, as the afternoon sun glowed gold across the stone walls, a particularly bold speck of dust floated upward. Brother Anselm gasped very, very quietly. His eyes widened, just a little. His quill hovered in midair. Defiant, he whispered, and he added it to the record. That evening, as the candles burned low, and the abbey bells chimed softly in the distance, Brother Anselm closed his volume. He rested his chin on his hand. His expression was calm, serene, but in his heart, he was quietly thrilled. A new kind of dust. Tomorrow, he would look for more. But for tonight, he slept peacefully, dreaming of floating specks, and the joy of very small discoveries. In the village of Eldenford, not far from the slow-growing turnips and the half-built wall, there was a workshop, small and cozy, with walls lined with skeins of wool in every shade of earth and sky. This was Elsbeth's place. Elsbeth was a weaver. She spent her days weaving long strips of cloth, thread by thread. But she had one small problem. She could never quite keep count. The number of threads she passed over, the number of knots she tied, the number of rows she wove. They always slipped away somewhere, like wisps of smoke. Elsbeth's expression was one of calm determination, tinged with a soft sigh. She would sit at her loom, counting in her head, 1, 2, 3, until she lost track. She would pause, look down at the fabric, then back at her hands, and try again. Sometimes she frowned gently, the faintest crease appearing between her brows, but never frustration. Instead, a quiet patience, a knowing smile, as if to say, well, it doesn't really matter. Her workshop smelled faintly of sheep's wool, damp earth, and a hint of lavender. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and a small cat curled up on a pile of yarn, purring softly. Elsbeth paused her weaving, reaching out to stroke the cat's soft fur. The cat blinked slowly, content in the stillness. Elsbeth returned to her loom, running her fingers over the threads, feeling their texture. The pattern was simple, gentle waves, the kind that moved slowly in the breeze. She liked it that way. Occasionally, villagers would stop by, peeking in through the open door. They would watch Elsbeth weaving, nodding quietly at the rhythmic movement, the slow dance of threads crossing and crossing again. "Are you counting?" one child once asked. Elsbeth smiled softly, her eyes twinkling with gentle humor. "I try," she said, "but sometimes the threads like to play tricks." The child laughed and ran off, leaving Elsbeth alone once more with her weaving. As evening drew near, the light in the workshop softened, casting long, gentle shadows across the floor. Elsbeth sat back, admiring her work. The cloth was not perfect. Some rows were longer, some shorter, but it was warm and real and just right. She folded the cloth carefully and placed it beside the loom. The cat stretched and leapt onto the windowsill, gazing out into the twilight. Elsbeth blew out the single candle. The room slipped into darkness, soft and calm. She whispered good night to the cat and to the threads that slipped quietly through her fingers. Then she rested, dreaming of waves moving slowly and of the gentle beauty in losing count. In the heart of Eldeford, where the shadows stretched long as evening approached, there was a small workshop, one with the scent of beeswax and gentle flame. Tomas was the candle maker. He worked slowly, with care. The flicker of a flame was, to him, something almost sacred. Every candle held a story, every wick a heartbeat, and Tomas listened closely. The room was quiet, except for the soft drip of wax and the gentle crackle of a small fire burning low in the hearth. Tomas's eyes were steady, focused, his lips pressed in a thin line of concentration. But his gaze softened whenever he looked at a finished candle, as if each one was a small, glowing friend. He dipped each wick carefully into the warm wax, watching as it thickened and hardened. Sometimes he hummed quietly, a soft tune that filled the room like a gentle breeze. Other times, he was silent, lost in thought. His hands moved slowly, patiently, as if time itself had paused to watch. Once, an apprentice came in, eager and bright-eyed. "Master Tomas," he said, "how do you make the flame so steady?" Tomas smiled softly, the corners of his eyes crinkling gently. "A steady flame," he said, "is not made by rushing. It is made by patience, by listening to the wax, the wick, and the air around them, and by knowing when to let go." The apprentice nodded slowly, taking in the quiet wisdom. The candle maker's workshop was small, but warm. Outside, the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky. Inside, the soft glow of candlelight danced on stone walls, filling the room with a golden calm. Tomas watched one candle flicker gently on the windowsill, his expression softening into quiet pride. A small smile played at his lips, almost shy. The flame seemed to pulse softly, like a slow, steady heartbeat. As night deepened, Tomas set down his tools, took a last look at his candles, and whispered a quiet goodnight to the flickering flames. His eyes closed slowly, and he dreamed of light that never hurried, flames that burned softly, and the gentle art of waiting. In Eldenford, at the very edge of the village square, stood a tall stone bell tower, withered and worn by time, but standing strong. Cedric was the bell ringer, a quiet young man, whose days began long before the sun peeked over the hills. His job was simply to ring the bell just so, marking the passing hours for all to hear. Each morning, Cedric climbed the narrow spiral stairs, his footsteps soft against the stone. He reached the top, pausing a moment to watch the village below. Bathed in the first light of dawn, his face was calm, a quiet seriousness softened by a gentle smile. He took a deep breath, then pulled the heavy rope. The bell's deep tone rolled across the fields, a slow, steady sound that seemed to touch everything. The sleeping houses, the slow-moving river, the birds beginning to sing. Cedric's eyes closed briefly as the sound echoed, feeling the vibration in his chest. The way the ancient bell seemed almost alive. His expression softened into quiet wonder. "Hello," he thought. "Old friend." The villagers below would pause, listening to the familiar chime. It marked the start of the day, the rhythm of their lives, and a gentle reminder of time's steady flow. Cedric did not rush. Each ring was measured, calm, and sure. The bell was his companion, and together they sang a slow, peaceful song. At midday, the bell rang again. Cedric wiped the sweat from his brow, a faint crease of concentration on his face, balanced by the soft smile of a man at peace with his work. The sound rolled out once more, strong and steady, a heartbeat in the village's gentle life. As evening fell, and the sky turned soft shades of purple and pink, Cedric climbed once more to the top of the tower. The last bell of the day rang out, slow and deep, like a lullaby for the village. Cedric's eyes shone softly in the fading light. His lips curved in a quiet, satisfied smile. And as night settled, the bell tower stood silent, guarding the peaceful dreams of Eldenford. In a quiet corner of Eldenford, behind a low stone wall covered in creeping ivy, there was a garden. This garden belonged to Greta, the gardener. She was a woman of few words, but many quiet thoughts. Her hands were worn and gentle, and she knew the language of seeds. Each morning, Greta would kneel by the earth, feeling the cool soil beneath her fingers. She would select the smallest seeds, tiny and full of promise, and place them carefully in neat rows. Her face was calm and patient, eyes half closed in soft concentration, a faint smile touching her lips as she worked. "Growth is slow," she often said, speaking mostly to herself. "The earth does not hurry. The seed does not rush." And so, she waited. Days passed with gentle rhythms. The soft rain, the warming sun, the whisper of the wind. Sometimes, Children from the village would come to watch. "Why do you wait so long?" they asked. Greta smiled kindly. "Because the best things take their time. Like a good story or a song. Like friendship or a dream." The children nodded slowly, learning a quiet lesson from the gardener's hands. The garden was never hurried, but always full of life. Tiny shoots would peek through the soil. Leaves would unfurl like sleepy eyes waking. Greta would tend each one with care, watching patiently as they grew. Her expression was soft, full of pride and quiet joy. As evening fell, the garden glowed softly under a sky full of stars. Greta rested her hands in her lap, looking out over the small patch of earth she loved. Her eyes were gentle, her smile serene, and she whispered a quiet thanks to the patient seeds and the slow, beautiful work of growth. In the heart of Eldenford, near the quiet market square, stood a humble pottery workshop. Aldrich, the potter, was known for his slow, patient ways. His hands moved gently over the soft, cool clay, feeling every curve, every ridge. The spinning wheel turned slowly, like the turning of the seasons. Aldrich's face was calm and focused, his eyes tracing the shape that grew beneath his fingertips. Sometimes he paused, listening to the soft sound of the wheel, the quiet rhythm of his own breathing. His lips pressed in a thin line of quiet concentration, but his hands were steady, sure. The villagers often admired his work. Simple bowls and jars, made with care and love. Aldrich never rushed. "Good things take time," he would say, like clay on the wheel, or stories told by the fire. His voice was soft, a gentle echo in the quiet workshop. One afternoon, a child came to watch, eyes wide with wonder as the clay spun round and round. "How do you make it so smooth?" the child asked. Aldrich smiled softly, his eyes twinkling with warmth. "With patience," he said, "and a steady hand." The child nodded slowly, taking in the quiet lesson. As the day faded to evening, Aldrich set down the finished pot, its curves perfect and soft in the fading light. He wiped his hands on his apron, his expression softening into quiet satisfaction. The workshop was peaceful, filled with the scent of earth and fire. Aldrich closed his eyes for a moment, dreaming of clay shaped slow and sure, and the quiet art of making. At the edge of Eldenford, the messenger Ewan began his slow journey. His horse stepped gently on the soft earth, carrying him through fields and forests, under the vast, open sky. Ewan's face was calm, eyes steady but filled with quiet thought. His task was important, but he knew the value of patience. Messages must travel, but never in a hurry. The road stretched before him, curving gently between hills and trees, bathed in the soft light of morning. Along the way, Ewan noticed the small things. A bird's song in the cool air, the rustle of leaves in the breeze, the distant shimmer of a stream. His lips curved in a faint smile, appreciating the slow rhythm of the journey. Villagers greeted him with nods and quiet smiles, knowing his slow pace was steady and sure. "No need to rush," they'd say. "The message will come when it must." Ewan nodded, feeling the weight of trust in their words. As the sun climbed higher, Ewan's horse moved with calm strength, carrying him forward, one slow step at a time. His eyes softened, watching the path unfold, knowing that sometimes the journey itself was the message. When evening settled, Ewan stopped to rest beneath an old oak tree. The sky blushed pink and gold, and the world felt wide and still. Ewan's face showed quiet peace, a slow smile spreading as he settled in for the night, ready for the journey ahead. In a small cottage at the edge of Eldenford, Eleanor the weaver worked with quiet grace. Her loom creaked softly, the steady rhythm of weaving filling the room. Eleanor's hands moved slowly, guiding thread by thread through the warp. Her expression was peaceful, a gentle smile playing on her lips. Each thread was chosen with care, soft wool from nearby sheep, dyed in colors as gentle as the morning sky. She wove not just cloth, but stories, patience, and calm. Every pattern told a slow tale. Every knot held a whispered secret. Sometimes, a child from the village would visit, watching the loom move back and forth. "How do you weave so gently?" the child asked. Eleanor looked up, eyes warm. "With patience and care," she said softly. "And by listening to the thread's song." The child nodded, feeling the quiet magic in the air. The sunlight shifted slowly across the room, casting soft shadows on the woven cloth. Eleanor's hands never hurried, her breathing steady, calm. She wove until the sky turned soft pink, then carefully set aside her work. Her eyes shone softly with quiet pride, a slow smile spreading across her face. As night settled over Eldenford, the loom sat silent, waiting for another day. Eleanor closed her eyes, dreaming of threads that wove patience and the gentle art of making.